Alcatraz is one of the most famous prisons in the world. A small island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, a bare rock with an impregnable fortress on it. The prison operated for 29 years, and throughout that time it inspired fear even in people who feared little. These were gangsters, murderers, and kidnappers. Here they sent America's most terrifying criminals, not under the pretense of rehabilitation found in gentler prisons, but simply for containment. It was believed that escaping from here was impossible. Yet, of course, people still tried. On the afternoon of the 27th of April, 1936, inmate number 210, Joseph Bowers, was tossing rubbish into the incinerator in the prison yard. Suddenly, he dropped the wheelbarrow he had been pushing and ran toward the fence, ignoring shouts from the guards. He even managed to climb over the fence. Then a gunshot rang out. Inmate 210 fell from a cliff, plummeted 15 meters, and was killed instantly. In a sense, he attained his goal to die outside the prison. This was the first documented escape attempt from Alcatraz. 14 would follow, and all but one would fail. Alcatraz Island lies 2 kilometers off the Californian coast, right in San Francisco Bay, beyond the famous Golden Gate Bridge. 2 kilometers? A laughable distance. The city lies in view, shorelines on every side. It seems you could simply dive in and swim away. But this impression is deceptive. The water in the bay is icy cold, the currents strong and carry you out to the open ocean. Sometimes the bay is swallowed by dense fog, so heavy you cannot see your own hand, let alone the shore. The island itself is tiny, just over 500 meters long and 180 meters wide. At its center, on the summit, stands the prison, a massive concrete block with a single entrance. Around it, a barbed wire fence and guard towers. Guards had orders to shoot to kill. Beyond the fence, steep cliffs, sometimes 6 meters, sometimes 15. At times, there were 3 guards for every prisoner. Ordinary inmates rarely arrived at Alcatraz. Only those who had driven the administrations of other prisons insane were transferred here. Psychopaths, sadists, rebels, and habitual escapees. Sinister rumors of the island spread quickly through American prisons. Everyone knew what happened at Alcatraz. Beatings, torture, forcing inmates to sleep on cold floors, and more. The cells were damp, windowless. There was nowhere to hide. Instead of doors, there were heavy iron bars. Many inmates lost their sanity. There are cases of prisoners chopping off their own fingers with an axe just to avoid work in the prison workshops. Suicides were a regular occurrence. Prison management admitted that the very existence of Alcatraz had a huge disciplinary effect. Criminals simply called it the Rock. Follow the rules, or you'll go to the Rock. That was a threat that worked. On the island, the local solitary confinement cells held an especially dreadful reputation. More commonly known as the Hole, dark stone boxes with no furniture. Prisoners were placed there naked, yet, ironically, some criminals volunteered to go to Alcatraz. These were those who loved good food and loathed the bad meals of other prisons. Everyone knew that for some reason, Alcatraz served the best prison food in America. Of course, even at Alcatraz, there were inmates who enjoyed special privileges from the administration. For example, the legendary Al Capone served his 11-year sentence here. His cell was the same damp, windowless chamber, but he was allowed proper furniture, a bed, a chair, even a desk. He played the banjo in the prison band and achieved a degree of musical success. Besides Capone, many other crime world stars were held at Alcatraz. Gangster legend Mickey Cohen, Machine Gun Kelly, the infamous killer and kidnapper, and dozens of lesser-known but no less brutal criminals, mobsters, raiders, bank robbers, thugs, bootleggers, and so forth. Up to 300 people at once. Fights, murders, revolts happened, and the guards were merciless. And though escape was deemed impossible and no successful breakout yet proven, inmates kept trying. Almost everything you see in films about prison breaks was first attempted by desperate Alcatraz prisoners. In 1937, 2 inmates, Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe, realized that security in the prison workshops was weaker than in the main building. That's where they made their attempt. They simply sawed through steel bars with stolen files and climbed out the window. They used tires to cushion their fall from a 6-meter cliff and fuel cans to stay afloat in the water. A dense fog covered the island, and the guards did not spot them. but the water temperature that day was only 11 degrees Celsius. The same fog that helped hide them disoriented them. They didn't know which way to swim. Their bodies were never found. For a time they featured on the FBI's most wanted list, but officially they were recorded as dead. The workshops were subsequently rebuilt. In 1938, 3 inmates decided to go further. They attacked the guards. One guard was bludgeoned to death with a crowbar. The prisoners seized his weapon, yet somehow failed to consider that hundreds more officers were stationed on the island. 2 of the escapees were shot dead. The 3rd surrendered. In 1939, the gangster Arthur "Doc" Barker and 4 companions soared through the bars in their cells. It turned out the bars hadn't been replaced since the days of the military prison and were soft steel. They broke the outer bars with a homemade jack. They reached the shoreline and began constructing a raft, but while gathering wood, they were spotted by a guard in a tower who opened fire. The guard was rewarded. New hardened steel bars were ordered. In 1941, 1 inmate hid inside a garbage container and reached the shore. Everything seemed to go smoothly. He entered the water and started swimming. But after about 5 minutes, he realized he was freezing to death. Struggling, he swam back and surrendered to the guards. In 1943, inmates attacked 2 guards, tied them up. While they attempted to break through the bars, one bound guard managed to crawl to his colleague and blow a whistle hanging around his neck. Guards opened fire on the escapees, who were already in the water holding stolen barrels. One survivor hid in a coastal cave for 2 days, then, starving, crawled back into the prison through the same window he had escaped from. During World War II, in the prison workshops they stitched uniforms for the US Army. In 1945, 1 inmate managed to steal a full set of a sergeant's uniform. Then, walking casually, he reached the ferry at the shore and boarded. But when the ferry docked, everyone's documents were checked, and the disguised sergeant, of course, had none. Over the years, escapees drowned, were shot, broke bones, attempted to build rafts, even tried sewing primitive wetsuits. But the most cinematic escape happened on the 2nd of May, 1946. It became known as the Battle of Alcatraz. Several men were involved, the most dangerous: Bernard Coy and Joseph Kretzer, seasoned gangsters. Coy served 25 years for armed robbery, and Kretzer was ranked by the FBI as public enemy number 4. Coy had studied guard patrols for months. He noticed that the gallery patrolled by an armed guard was separated from the inmates only by a metal grate with bars wide enough to squeeze through. On the chosen day, there were 2 guards in the block, one unarmed, one armed. The unarmed guard was distracted and strangled, while the armed guard was away. When he returned, Coy ambushed him. Coy had starved himself for months to slim enough to slip through the bars. He grabbed a ring of keys, a rifle, and a pistol. With them, Coy and his friends overpowered more guards and freed about 10 neighboring inmates. But many freed prisoners, upon learning the plan, returned to their cells. The plan was simple: fight through to the boats. It failed immediately. The gangsters tried the wrong key, jamming the lock. Alarm hadn't yet been raised. Then a new shift of guards entered the block. They were taken hostage. 8 hostages and plenty of arms now in the hands of the rioters. The battle raged for 2 days. Inmates fought fiercely and refused to surrender. On the 2nd day, the prison leadership called in the army. US Marines landed, recent veterans of Okinawa. They didn't hesitate to toss grenades into the prison blocks. 5 men died, 14 were wounded. 2 of the surviving inmates were later executed in the gas chamber. The 3rd received another life sentence. Security at Alcatraz was dramatically reinforced, and nothing like that ever happened there again. That is, until the legendary and still mysterious escape of 1962, the one that became known as the Anglin Brothers escape. 4 men took part in the legendary escape: brothers John and Clarence Anglin, Frank Morris, and Alan West. It's worth noting that none of the 4 killed anyone. Morris dealt drugs and committed robberies. The Anglin brothers specialised in burglaries and car theft. West stole cars too. They all ended up in Alcatraz after escape attempts from other prisons. The plan was devised by Morris. He noticed in Block B, behind the concrete cell walls, old ventilation shafts. The concrete itself was very old and brittle. Using a spoon, melted silver coins, and a vacuum cleaner motor, the prisoners built a drill. For a year they drilled the wall. They worked about an hour a day while music played over the prison loudspeakers, masking the noise. They concealed the holes with plugs made of newspaper, water, and glue. West and Morris spent months bartering with other inmates for rubberized raincoats and jackets, from which they crafted a raft. They also used newspaper papier-mâché to make body-sized bundles and painted replicas of their heads with real hair stolen from the prison barbershop. On the night of June 11/12, 1962, the most famous escape in Alcatraz history began. The fake bodies were covered with blankets, dummy heads placed on pillows. The Anglin brothers and Morris crawled through the tunnel. West did not go. Whether he failed to make it or lost courage remains unknown. We know the escape details because of him. The ventilation tunnel was extremely narrow, only about a meter wide. They first climbed 10 meters upward, emerged onto the roof, then slid down a pipe. The 3 escapees reached the water, inflated their rubber raft using bellows stolen from a prison club accordion, and floated away. They were never seen again. According to the official version, they drowned at sea. On the far shore, police found a plastic-wrapped wallet with addresses and photos of the Anglin relatives, a homemade life vest with a broken valve and scraps of rubberized material. The FBI concluded that all 3 had drowned, or did they? In 2011, National Geographic reported that a different FBI report, recently declassified, told another story. According to it, the raft was indeed found dragged away from the shore into reeds, and footprints led from it. It was also reported that on the 13th of June 1962, near San Francisco Bay, 3 unknown men stopped a car, forced out the driver, and fled. After the Anglin escape, someone began regularly sending their mother flowers and later beautiful postcards from South America. In 1973, when she died, 2 strange women attended the funeral. Men disguised as women, according to witnesses. In 2013, the FBI received a letter allegedly from John Anglin. He claimed to have cancer, requested to return home, and offered a deal: 1 year in prison if they provided treatment. The FBI deemed the letter a fake. In 2020, the Irish Business Post claimed that a new Irish facial recognition system found a 1,975 photograph from Brazil of 2 smiling men wearing sunglasses. The algorithm declared them John and Clarence Anglin with 97% certainty. Alcatraz prison was closed in 1963, just 1 year after the famous escape. The cost of operation had become too high, and the building quickly deteriorated from wind and seawater. Since 1983, an annual triathlon called Escape from Alcatraz has been held around the island. Competitors swim 2.5 kilometers from the island to the shore, then cycle 29 kilometers and run 13 kilometers. Every year someone succeeds. Thus the legend remains alive.